Hey everyone, welcome to a CBC Resource video where we're looking to take a topic relevant to faith, break it down in an easy to understand way to help us all as we seek to grow. So today we're looking at something that is foundational to studying the Bible, a basic principle, and that is to understand the genre of the book of the Bible you're in. We read the letter to the church in Ephesus much differently than we read Ezekiel in the Old Testament. And so we've got all of the books of the Bible broken down into six broad categories. Now, you may come across another source out there that breaks them down even further into subcategories. That's totally fine. This is designed to be a macro overlook at every book of the Bible. First, you've got Genesis to Ruth in the Old Testament. These are narrative books. They advance and tell the story of the Old Testament. So within these books, look for two key elements. Look for time. And so this will be one generation to another, so many years past, things like that. But look for the story to actually chronologically advance. And then also look for commentary and detail. And this might be within a book that is mostly time, but provides some, okay, the time's not necessarily moving forward. Here's detail that complements and supplements your understanding. Or even a book like, say, Ruth, where the focus isn't so much on what time passes, but here is detail that's going on that teaches us out of these Old Testament books. Genesis to Ruth, narrative genre. Then after that, you have Job to Song of Solomon. These are your poetry and wisdom books. You certainly have a story in the book of Job, but the emphasis is not on that story advancing through time. Instead, the emphasis in these books is twofold. Within your wisdom books, logically, look for education, look for instruction on wise living, on holy living. And then within the poetry books, you'll find that as well, but also really look for worship and praise. The poetry books provide us with beautiful examples, calls to worship, standards of worship, reasons to worship, to praise God. Look for these two things in your poetry and wisdom books as you're reading them. After Song of Solomon, we now have Isaiah to Malachi, the final big chunk of the Old Testament. And these are your prophetic books. And so this is a specific message God has for his people delivered through a prophet at a specific time. The key thing to look for here is an exhortation or a challenge, a call to the people to realign with God. Whether that's to realign with the covenant commitments they made, to realign with his truth, to realign with his standards of what is right and just for the society, whatever it may be, look for, identify, highlight, underline a call to return to the Lord in the books of the prophets. Then you come to the New Testament, and we see some really fascinating parallels. So first you've got Matthew to John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what we call the Gospels. These are written by four different authors to four primary different audiences, but they all do the same thing. They tell the story of Jesus's earthly ministry. And so like the narrative books in the Old Testament, they advance the chronology of the New Testament from Jesus's birth, and actually even before Jesus's birth, to then his crucifixion and resurrection. Matthew and John wrote about what they experienced. Mark and Luke wrote about what they were taught, what they learned. For more on those, you can see a video we'll link to below that breaks down the key differences between each of the four Gospels and shows how they harmoniously tell the story of Christ's ministry. After John, we then come to Acts to Jude. These are the epistles, and that word just means letters. And so these are letters written to either single individuals, churches in small regions, churches in larger regions, but regardless, they're letters. So they tell the story of Christ's mission continuing with his church, which is incredible that we get to continue to be a part of that today. And then also look for two key components within these letters. Look for theological instruction. Hey, here's proper belief. Here's what to believe. Here's how to understand grace. Here's how to understand sanctification, holiness, redemption, forgiveness, etc. Here's how to understand what we believe. And then they also continue directly related to that, or they also contain directly related to that practical application. Here's what to do with what you believe. Here's how to take your doctrine and live it out. You'll find both of those two essential components in the epistles. And the last book of the New Testament is Revelation, and what we refer to as apocalyptic literature, apocalyptic in genre. You'll notice a lot of metaphors. You'll notice a lot of heavy use of imagery that's essential to the apocalyptic genre. You'll see a lot of parallels between some of the Old Testament prophetic books. And so you'll notice parallels in the lessons there, but really Revelation is about John's revealed vision of the end times. And so you've got these metaphors as we anticipate and look forward to events that have not yet taken place. Those are the six broad categories of the genres of the Bible. We hope this helps and encourages you, and we'll see you next time.